Would you please stand? Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Hunters Hill Council, number 4476, 9th of March 2020. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet tonight and the waters that surround us, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace, diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us, to the common good and as in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Please have a seat. I don't think we have any apologies this evening. Are there any declarations of interest, please, councillors? Councillor Collins.
A non-pecuniary, non-significant interest in matter 4.6, which I will stay for.
Thank you. We move to the confirmation of the previous minutes. Move Councillor Williams.
As modified the PC.
Okay. Seconded Councillor Sanderson. Has everybody seen the minutes, amended minutes? Would you like to have a quick? They're okay. It's just a couple of process issues, I believe, that were amended in nothing in particular of note. Okay. So being moved and seconded, all in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. It's my pleasure to acknowledge the efforts of the SES during the recent storms, and I've invited Louise Bertoni and the members of the SES to come here tonight for us to thank you formally. And I'd like to read the Merrill Minute if you'll indulge me for a moment. During the weekend of February 7 to 9 and during the week February 18, Hunters Hill experienced severe storms with a significant area of the municipality experiencing fallen trees, water inundation, building damage and power outages. Is there anything else I should add to that, SES? Quite a few things, I'm sure. The New South Wales SES Hunters Hill unit were on hand to respond quickly and effectively. I've had so many people call me to tell me what a great job you did, and they did it all within a week of this happening. So you must have done a great job. You certainly impressed a lot of people. From the SES, they reported to me there were 101 jobs logged in Hunters Hill, and most of these requests for assistance were completed within 2 days, 48 hours. Incredible effort. The Hunters Hill SES volunteers worked an extraordinary of 400 plus hours during this time. We'd like to thank those who were self-employed for giving up their time and employers who supported those people. The New South Wales SES Hunters Hill Unit Commander Louise Bertoni advised that most of the work her unit performed included removal of trees from roads, pools, footpaths, tarping roofs, securing windows with silicone. I wish I'd had some of that silicone on February the 8th. My house was leaking front and back for a while. The unit also assisted local nursing homes with sandbagging, and I think that was IRT down at Woolwich, and securing property and making sure the residents were safe. Council Walks teams also did a great job, and I'd like to thank them as well. They worked solely to clear fallen trees and branches, supporting the efforts of the local SES and other emergency services. The New South Wales SES is a volunteer-based organisation that works with communities to prepare and respond to severe weather events. Certainly was. We thank those people who volunteer their time for the work that you do in Hunters Hill and to keep our community safe. And members of the SES, I applaud you. I'd like to ask Louise Bertoni, please come up, and would you like to say a few words, please? And I have a small presentation for you and the members afterwards, which I think we'll do over here against this wall and give one photograph.
Thank you all for that nice thank you. These guys and girls work very hard to do all the work. Some did it at midnight till 4 a.m. Other people were doing in between their actual work jobs. Others took time off from their own work to do it. Then they duck back out, do the job, and then come back again to SES. We not only did ride, Hunters Hill, we also assisted ride in their area as well. The guys and girls work very hard, and yeah, they were very dedicated, so I'm very proud of them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Would you like to come back just for a moment? The councillors may have some questions.
Yes.
Councillor Cresswell.
Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you, everyone, for everything you did. I was quite fortunate in the storms, but I know many others weren't, and greatly appreciated. While you're here, you have a live stream, you have the press, you have the attention of the council. What if young people in our community, so inspired by everything that you all did, would like to sign up and join the SES or get more involved? What support do you need from the community, and how can more people get involved with the SES?
Well, it's two things. You can turn up to the unit on a Monday night, 6:45. We're right behind the Gladesville Police Station. You can apply online, and that sends an automatic email to myself as well as the senior management team. We have members from as young as 16 to over 70, so you don't have to pick up a chainsaw. You can just do, you could do the web, you can do ops, you can operations, that's the computer stuff. There's a whole range of different skills everybody's got, and any skill, like just turning up, is the main thing. People power is the main one.
Well, it worked this time, so
Yes.
thank you very much.
No worries.
Councillors, any further comments or questions? Thanks, Louise. So I'll move that motion. Seconded Elizabeth Crassoy. Everybody in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So if we might just, if I could ask you to come over again. Suspend standing orders. Councillor Miles, Councillor Williams. If I could ask you to come over against the wall here for a moment, and we'll get a photo of you all. And with Louise, and I have a presentation. So this is something to hang on your wall over there. It's not much, but I hope it helps you remember how much we appreciate your efforts. Thank you very much to you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
All the best. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. Enjoy your showing tonight.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miniatures in standing orders. Thank you.
Still didn't get the other parcel though.
So Councillor Collins moved to resumption of standing orders. Councillor Miles seconded. All in favour? Councillor
I'd like to
Councillor.
move to bring forward item 4.7, Mary Street, delivery of a pedestrian crossing at the corner of Mark Street. I'd like to move that.
Can I
We've got
also
speakers.
suggest that we move forward with council rectification reports?
Yes. 4.6 then 4.7.
4.6 and 4.7.
Yes.
Second, Councillor Miles. Councillors? All in favour? That's carried. Councillor, we have a speaker
yeah, 4 points. Yeah, for both.
for 4.6 and we have 2 for 4.7. So, Mr. Glenn Stanford, welcome.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm the president of the rugby club. If I could just take one moment to briefly acknowledge the fact that the drainage on B3, Boronia 3, has been all but completed and signed off, and a quick walk around after the rain of last week shows that it's working beautifully. And I know there's George up there, and thank you very much for your efforts, and it's been good to work with you to get that done. But the business of tonight, the council report 4.6, to my view, fairly reflects the negotiations and discussions that we've had with council in particular. I acknowledge Barry, who I've been across the table with for many, many months now. We've always paid our rent that's been put forward by the council, and that's been the case for as long as I've been involved. 2016 was a point though at which the council made a decision to align the rents of the fields that it controls with those of Nesrock. So that's what's brought us to this point, is how the rents get established and get aligned. You were told, as we were back in 2016, that those increases would be quite modest. However, the invoices that came to us initially showed nearly 500% increase in the rents that we were paying. However, over a 3-year process, and more particularly in the last 6 to 9 months, working with Barry and other council officers, we've been able to get to a point where we agree on the rent going forward and the basis upon which that will be calculated. The difference that's before you tonight is the way in which the phase-in has been done. What the policy of council that's been put in place is that the increases that come about from the alignment of rents from the way they were to the Nesrock rents was to phase them in over 4 years. Now, our reading of that policy, and in our view a common sense interpretation of it, of what the authors of that policy were, was that a phase-in is an equal phase-in over 4 years to get to the agreed ongoing rate. As I said, we've agreed this rate, and we started back at, say, this level. What council has put before you for you to accept is that the first year's increase was right up to here immediately, and small steps. What we're suggesting is they're equal steps to get to the 4th year. As I said, we agree on the rate going forward. It's around about $20,000, give or take. We started off at 7. So the initial, the paper before you takes it up to sort of 16,000 or something like that in the very first year, and just small increases. We're saying it should be even. That would be a just interpretation of that policy, and what we think the authors would have had in mind with that. That's $7,800 we're talking about, and that's really, as I understand the paper, what is before you is to either insist that we pay that, or perhaps interpret their policy in the way that we do. The second element of difference between us, in fact we've agreed this, is the discount for being a society that uses the Oval. The policy allows a discount of up to 30%, and we think that's...
Move to extend. Councillor Miles, Councillor Williams, all in favour, please go ahead.
I'll be very brief. We've agreed after some prolonged negotiations at a 10% discount, but we believe that the contributions that we've made to the ground in the past and what we intend to make in the future, community facility being the most dominant one in front of everyone, we believe that justifies a discount off the Nesrock rates. Now, in your paper it is agreed, acknowledged that we've agreed at 10%. What I'd like it just to be tabled is that we agreed that would be reviewed every 3 years, depending on what our contribution is and whether that discount should continue. So in short, we started at 7,000. We're being asked to go to 20,000. We've agreed to that. It's nearly a 200% increase, but we're suggesting it should be stepped in even amounts. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. Stay with us just for a moment. There may be a couple of questions. Councillor Cresswell.
Yes.
Just on that last that you mentioned, can I just check, so in point 2 where it says, do you have it in front of you?
Yes, yes I do.
Benefit users, and that the continuance of this discount beyond these financial years be subject to further review. Are you suggesting you'd like us to say to be reviewed every 3 years, or are you happy with the fact that it says that it be subject to further review?
Oh, look, I would prefer 3 years, just so that we've all got something.
Clarity of.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Thank you. Please proceed. The Councillor Miles, move Councillor Miles.
With some amendments, Mr Mayor.
Okay, what's the amendment?
I'd like to move that the $4,721 in financial year 17-18 be discounted as the $3,114 in 18-19, bringing up to the levels that were just adjusted. And as per Councillor Crassoy's comment in point 2, that the 10% be reviewed every 3 years rather than.
Can you, Councillor Miles, could you help us get the words correct, please?
That the fees for Bronia Park Ovals by Huntersville Rugby Union be adjusted to reflect the additional discount required as suggested by the club in table page 154. The tables provided there, 154, and that in point 2 we remove the word the continuance of the discount beyond these financial years be reviewed every 3 years. Sorry, that at the end, in the last sentence of point 2, of this discount beyond these financial years be reviewed every 3 years. So remove be subject to further review. That's all right.
Sticky key.
That this discount beyond these financial years be reviewed every 3 years. Yep. Can I just check with the acting general manager that point 1, the amendment, point 1 of the amendment's clear about the staging of the increases?
Yeah,
Pertains to the $7,000 odd.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. I think was your intention to leave the first part of that number 1 there, so the adjusting to reflect the ground usage.
The ground usage
and an additional discount.
and the additional discount.
Yeah.
As per the table on page 154.
Yep. And the same as point 2, that the bit you've moved there would be additional to what's there here.
Is that clear, Councillor? Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Crasso. Councillor Collins, were you going to sit out this one, did you say?
No,
you had a non-pecuniary issue, but you...
Non-significant.
But you weren't going to speak, did you say?
No, I won't. I don't think I'll need to speak, but probably don't intend to, but I'm not leaving for it. I'm voting on it.
You said you're not leaving for it. Okay. Councillor Crasso. Okay, got to move in a second. Councillor Miles.
I think that this is pretty plain, and I think obviously this is an ongoing issue for the club. End of the day, $7,000. We're going to get into the NESROC rate. I don't see any reason to be drawing this out and increasing it in such a significant way, in one big way. So I have total sympathy with what the club's asking for, and I think that there is an element of goodwill given what's happened at Bronia Park and the capital contributions that the club puts in, especially for the 10%. I would probably err on the side of that being something that should be larger, because it can go up to 30%, but equally we've come to an accommodation 10%, but we can review that every 3 years. So I think that this is a fair deal. It brings us into parity with the other NESROC councils, and the club's obviously accepting of that. So I think that it's important that we take on this request to stage the increases, because we're going to get to where we need to be in a couple of years, in this financial year. So I think that we need to do this.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? Anybody for?
Just a question.
Question? Councillor Sanderson.
Does that $7,000 reflect the change there would have been if, as Mr Sanford indicated, in my recollection of the original motion all that time ago, the amount or the difference would have occurred had the increments been applied in equal proportions over that period?
I'd have to go and check that calculation, but what I can say is it's exactly in line with the fees the council adopted as its first and second year fees in that 4-year phase-in. So, as it says in the front of the report, back before then they were paying $11 per hour, and the new rates were $23.50 per hour plus a lighting charge of $20.50. So that gives you an indication of the scale of the change in the first year.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. That's unanimous. Thank you.
I'd like to move.
I have a speaker for 4.7. Did you want to speak to
Yeah, sure.
4.7? Is that the...
That's right.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr
you very
Sanford.
much.
Thank you. 4.7. Mr John O'Grady. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, and thank you to Councillor Collins for his support during the last number of years with getting the pedestrian crossing along the way. My name is John O'Grady. I have children at Villa Maria, and I'm representing the PNF here today and the wider school community. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the council, thank the council for supporting and approving the installation of the pedestrian crossing at the corner of Mark and Mary Street. It, as you know, is a significant safety issue, and I sincerely thank you on behalf of the PNF and the community for your approval for the installation. I'm really here today to talk about our concern around the funding and when this is going to be installed. Our understanding is that a funding request has gone to the state government, or will be going to the state government. And what we are asking here today is that funding is made by Hunters Hill Council, because this is an ongoing current safety issue. If I can just highlight some critical events, I won't lead you through all of the detail over the last nearly 3 years of this process, but some critical events. We started off this process when Suzanne Kwan, who's here today, a parent of a Villa student, saw a significant accident in June 2017, and she sent an email to council, kicked things off. Sometime after that, Stuart Ireland, who's a parent with kids at Villa, spoke here at council, spoke on a number of points, but I do clearly remember Stuart talking around, it's still an accident waiting to happen. And then soon after that, we had a child who was hit in August 2018, and that's Angus McNamee, and his father is here tonight, who will speak after me. So tonight I ask of the council that let's not push this down the road. We have uncertainty in the world at the moment with whatever is going on. State funding can change, and it's going to take some time. I say that this is a significant issue. I see the kids, running the gauntlet every day, and we need to get this installed ideally before end of term 2. So I thank you for your time today, and I ask for your consideration to make a decision that will help the children and the people of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr O'Grady. Councillors, are there any questions of Mr O'Grady? Thank you. Please have a seat. The next speaker we have is Mr. McNamee. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for your time. Thank you, John, for your very helpful summary of the events to date, particularly over the last 3 years. I'd like to start by just saying that I can understand the council's perspective. I can understand that as leaders of our community, you do have to make some very difficult decisions. I know that on the one hand, you've got finite resources. On the other hand, there's a list of, no doubt, very many very worthy projects that all require attention, and you've got some difficult decisions to make in terms of to which projects you allocate those resources. I believe that there are some projects that demand the highest priority, and I believe that my son's experience is a prime example of why this particular project demands the highest priority. So just to go into a bit of detail about that experience, on the 9th of August in 2018, I was at work at a video conference involved in what I thought at the time was a very stressful, very serious conversation, but that was quickly put into perspective by the phone call that I received from my wife. And my son is fine, thank goodness, but the phone call was Angus has been hit. He is in an ambulance being taken to North Shore Hospital. So you can imagine the shock that I went through at the time. Just to provide some context, my wife is always extremely cautious at that crossing. So that afternoon, it was about 3:15, she was walking home from school with Angus. They were at the intersection of Mary Street and Mark Street. They were at the northern end of Mary Street, crossing the road. My wife always takes the utmost precautions when she crosses the road, as she did that afternoon. But as is always the case, there was a lineup of cars that went around the corner from Mary Street into Mark Street, and it's extremely difficult to check whether or not there's a car moving southbound down Mary Street. So she took all precautions that you would reasonably expect of her. The driver of the car was a former primary school teacher, also very aware of the danger at that intersection, also took all precautions that you could reasonably expect. She was driving carefully, she was on the lookout for parents crossing the road. She didn't see my wife and my child, they didn't see her. My wife thought that the coast was clear, had tried to look around the lineup of cars, could not see a car, stepped out from beside a car, was immediately confronted with a car upon her and upon my son, immediately stepped back and immediately tried to pull my son back. The car screeched to a halt. She was able to pull herself and to step back completely. She wasn't able to pull my son back completely. My son's right foot was wedged underneath the tyre of the car. She managed to pull my son's foot out from beneath the tyre of the car. It was literally a matter of inches. He was incredibly lucky. The Villa community was incredibly lucky. Obviously, us as a family were incredibly lucky as well. But I hope that there isn't a delay just because we were incredibly lucky and just because of those inches that saved my son's life. So I hope it's not a case of if the worst case scenario had eventuated, this project wouldn't have been delayed and the crossing would be in place now or would be in place by the end of the second semester. I hope that you, like me, understand that this is a prime example, the perfect illustration. And I say perfect because it illustrates the danger of that intersection, but thankfully a life wasn't spent on that day. So I think it's the perfect illustration of the danger involved in that intersection. I believe that this is a project that demands the highest priority. I think that we are all compelled to take action. Yes, you as a council have a choice to make, but I strongly believe that there's only one decision that you could make that's in the best interest of the community, and that is to act quickly and without delay.
Thank you, Mr. McNamee. Mr. Mr McNamee, would you stay with us just for a moment, please? Councillor Collins, do you have a question, Mr McNamee?
No, I don't. Actually, I was just going to move.
All right. Are there any questions, Councillor, Mr McNamee? I have one. How's Angus's foot now?
Amazingly, it's fine. So amazingly, he was only treated for shock and for minor injuries to his foot.
And how long did it take for him to recover? Was it quick recovery?
It was quite quick. So
That's great.
it was truly an incredible incident, and we were incredibly lucky.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to hear that. That doesn't lessen the importance.
Yes.
Just pleased to hear as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move an amended motion if I can.
All right, sure.
The recommendation, instead of the report be received and noted, that Hunters Hill Council commit to building the crossing at the corner of Mary and Mark Street as recommended by the local area traffic committee. Local area traffic committee. That it be funded out of general reserves if the budget, if no alternative budget source can be identified. Question of the General Manager through you, Mr Mayor.
Certainly.
Would that satisfy the objectives of the motion? Part two.
Are you expecting a report back to council on the funding?
No, that it just that it identifies a funding source.
We'll look for a funding source.
Yes.
And at some stage we need to have that approved by the council. So I just need to
Well, then
think about the timing of that.
I would like to. Now I understand that we sold a road reserve last week. Is that for was it $270,000? Is that right, Mount Morris Street?
The last council meeting. I wasn't there.
Mount Morris Street.
I think that was, yeah.
And they have to be. That has to be put back into roads, doesn't it? Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, so it could be funded out of that because that wasn't anticipated or budgeted for when we did the budget in April last year.
So what we normally do with this sort of report
Yeah.
is we do a report on the funding options for it. So and that would be before the council, so you could make a decision as to what the funding source is. If it's moving around, like you'd normally have a report that dealt with the priorities.
Yeah.
There'll be the roadworks, and if this particular project was the top of the priorities, then we'd look at a funding source for it. If there was no moving things around, then we would look at reserves and add it into our capital works. But it'd be a decision of the council to vote the money.
Okay,
From a
but if we
particular
do
source.
that decision now, that's advice. Is that correct?
I think it does actually identify the general reserves, isn't it? So I think that would probably suffice. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, that's great.
So is that clear?
Yeah, I
You
think that's
just
good.
checked?
As long as that meets the statutory requirements, so that we can get
Yeah.
this done.
I'm not sure it does
It's
meet the
probably-
statutory requirements because you're required to find a source of funding.
I've found a source of funding.
And I'm not sure that is
The
what's
general
intended.
reserve is a source
I'm
of
not,
funding.
Councillor
It would-
Miles,
it would-
Councillor Collins, I'm not sure that satisfies the requirement to find a source of funding. It refers to other things other than what we've got in savings, basically. But it can come back to council and that can be
Does it?
identified and council can decide whether they approve it. But that's not a source of funding as it's laid out.
Well, then I'd like to identify a source of funding. This has gone on since 2017, 2.5 years, and we can, between us, figure out where to fund it. Now, we sold a road reserve for $270,000 last week. That wasn't anticipated in the budget. The proceeds of that have to go to roads. So this would satisfy. So I'd let's say you can put that in the motion if you like, that's required. But we don't need to have another report to find out where the budget is, because we've got $8 million plus of unrestricted funds that it can be identified from. And
I think the proper way to do it, and it's up to the council as to how they want to deal with it. You've certainly indicated how we should go about looking for a funding source, but the proper way to do it would be to come back with a report that actually said where the funding source is coming from, and the council actually votes that on the night. So,
well, I'm saying where it comes from, the general reserve, if no other alternative funding source can be found. So,
Okay, thank you for bringing it back to me just for a moment, Councillor Collins. The General Manager's advice to you is not what you're suggesting.
well, I would like to move the motion that I've suggested, because I believe that we have what's required to move this along.
Right.
So it's my understanding that we have our requirements there.
Okay, have we got a seconder for the amended motion? For the amendment at this stage? Are you moving an amended motion, aren't you?
An alternative motion.
All right. Seconder, Councillor Miles. Do you wish to speak further on this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll start you off again.
So I've been going through trying to track how it's come to this stage with nothing happening. Now we first heard of it from.
Just to
I've
be
got
clear,
5 minutes. Huh?
you got 5 minutes.
5 minutes, fantastic. Mr. Ireland and Mr. O'Grady came to council in February 2018, following representations made to council in August of 2017. It was sent to the local area traffic committee in the September 2018 with unanimous in principle support. It went back, we had a consultant's report come back to the local area traffic committee in 21st of March 2019, which was last year, recommending the crossing. That was one bit over a year after Mr. Ireland and Mr. O'Grady came to address his council, and 18 months after they first made representations to council.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. I think in 2018 it was the previous council. In 2017.
Councillor, could you allow Councillor Collins to continue on?
Beg your pardon?
Councillor, could you allow Councillor Collins? Please go ahead.
Do I get my time started again, Mr. Mayor?
No. Go ahead. Speak quickly.
21st of March 2019, consultant's report brought back to the local area traffic committee. I chased this up in June 2019, told further consultation with the school was required. This school was overwhelmingly in support. They always were. I don't know why I need to go back to consultation there. But in the initial, we had 100 submissions received with 6 objections, 94 in support of the proposal when it was put out to community consultation. Now, it wasn't put in the, got my notes here somewhere. It wasn't put in in 2017, after having representation from council and discussed in early 2018, it wasn't put in the 2019 budget in April of that year. It wasn't put in the 2019 budget for the 2020 year. So 2 years when this has been an issue and it hasn't been put in the budget. Now, 18 months after or was it a year after representations were made to council, someone was hit by a car. Now, I fail to understand how we can have such a serious issue within metres of a school that's gone on for 2.5 years, and we sit here at this point and brought it back to council after, I think I've seen it in local area traffic committee 3 times. It's always passed unanimously. Everybody agrees it needs to be done. And here we are with a report saying that we don't have any money and we're putting in a grant for it. But if that doesn't come through, and look, it does not look like, I don't know what the state budget's not going to look like, but it's probably not going to be very good. So if that doesn't come through, then we're nowhere. and then that's been 3 years and nothing's happened. Now, this is our responsibility. It's a local road. It's a local issue. The local residents are affected. It's a safety issue. It is very simple that we just do it. It's $88,000. We can afford it. We can't afford not to do it. And so let's just get it done.
Councillor Crasso, you had a clarification you need to make? Was it to do with dates of when it began? No, not necessary. Anybody wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Sanderson.
I don't wish to speak against, but I wonder whether I could ask a question through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager.
Yes, please go ahead.
Would it be possible to put this thing in a format the General Manager will be happy with and provide a source of costing for our next meeting?
I think my thinking would be that would be the appropriate way to handle it, that we can actually look at this project as if we're going to allocate additional funding to what's already in the operational plan. You would normally look at all the projects that you want to give priority to, how this one stacks up against it, and in that time we could actually have a look at the alternative funding sources, as Councillor Collins suggested, and bring back a report that would identify those. So I think that's from a point of view of a governance of the council funds, that's the best way to look at it, even though there's been a strong indication of where the money should come from. If we can't find anything, I think it's best to get a report that provides that exactly.
So effectively, if we go this way, we're talking about a delay of a fortnight.
Yep, to get the next council meeting. Yep.
Anybody wishing to speak against the motion?
I just also had a question.
Councillor Crasso.
Can I just check on the processes with the RMS, well, what was previously the RMS? They have to come back with us. That we have to do all that reporting. I just want to be clear on some of the things that were said. Like, council hasn't actually been sitting on this doing nothing with it, right? It had to go to the traffic committee. It had to go to the did it have to go to the RMS for
RMS sits on the traffic committee with
yes, but I mean
police.
for measurements, what's the word for it?
Warrants.
And that all had to then come back to then go back to the traffic committee. So they are the points that have to be followed in order to show good governance.
In the middle of it as well.
And consultation.
And the consultation report. So all of those things has to be done for us as a council to be able to show correct governance.
That's correct.
And responsible management.
That's correct.
Correct?
It's a process.
Oh, so it doesn't, sorry.
No, it doesn't.
Saying I'm
quite
wrong.
happy to say why it's not if you'd like to answer the
No,
question.
Councillor Crasso
I'll say
has the
my
floor,
right,
thanks.
right.
Councillor Crasso has the floor.
So I'm just asking, are we allowed to build a crossing without doing community consultation, without doing the warrants, without consulting the state?
It's been done.
No. So we do have to do all those.
It's all been done.
correctly.
It's all been done.
No, I'm just talking about the timeline to now. So, because you're kind of implying the timelines, like that we had control over making it shorter.
We did, yes.
Now, Councillor, this is
2.5 years.
Councillor Collins, this is not a debate across the table.
Okay,
No,
well
that's
then,
all. I
maybe you
just
should start with the
wanted to clarify.
president
Councillor
with some
Collins, this
questions,
is not a
Mr Mayor.
debate
That
across the
council's done the
table.
right thing till now.
Councillor Crasso, what's the point you want to make?
I just wanted to clarify whether council has done the right thing till now, to this point, to bring us to this point.
My understanding is that's correct.
And we're following correct governance.
General Manager?
I might just ask Mr. Mulcahy to comment on that.
Through you, Mr Mayor, certainly since March, since my term in council, we've followed the process through delegation from the RMS to consult the community, refer the matter back to Traffic Committee. It came to council, who asked for further clarification back to Traffic Committee. The process is now we have an approval from council. It's subject to approval for detailed design from the RMS, which is the stage we're at now, and Ausgrid, because there is changes to the electrical and lighting system around that.
So council approved it and we're waiting on the state.
I'm now waiting for approval from the RMS and from Ausgrid.
Cool. I just wanted to clarify.
Question, if I may, through you, Mr Mayor.
Who's your question on? Can you put it through the General Manager, please?
Through the General Manager. In the 2.5 years that it's taken to get to this point, is absolutely the fastest it could have been done. And have you ever perhaps heard of a crossing being built in a shorter time frame than 2.5 years.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the process is to refer it to Traffic Committee, prepare a detailed design and refer it back to Council. So, yes, it could be done quicker and following the correct process.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody wishing to speak against?
I've got a question.
Who's your question of, Councillor?
The General Manager, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification. Councillor Collins mentioned it was 88,000, but my summing is 108,000. Is that correct? Just so that we know exactly what the amount of money is. Because in the papers it says civil works 60, lighting electrical 20, and application Osgrid 8,000.
That's 88,000.
Okay.
Yep, 88.
88.
Wow.
88,000.
Thank you.
Any further queries?
No,
Anybody wishing to speak for the motion?
I'll speak for the motion, Mr. Mayor.
The amended motion.
The motion, as it is on the floor. Yes, I think that much like Reeby Road, and this is why I don't really understand why we're having this argument right now. Reeby Road was built out of the cash reserves. We made that decision as a council. That's the exact motion that's before us now. Now, there was a very glaring safety problem with Reeby Road. There is obviously a glaring safety problem with Mary Street. We have a responsibility as council to do this as quickly as we like. Now, we can wait for 2 weeks and get a report back that weighs this against the other priorities, as the Acting General Manager said, or we can say tonight as a council, this is our priority, we have the cash to do it, and we're going to get it done. What's not in this motion that was in Councillor Collins's previous motion that brought this report to us is that we're going to try and, it is our intention, or I believe it's Councillor Collins's intention, to have this done by the end of term 2. If we're waiting for reports and obfuscating, I think, we really need to keep in mind that the longer we delay this, the longer there is children at that crossing potentially at danger. So I don't know why we're not talking about doing this tonight, or why we'd need a report back. It's an obvious safety issue, and we have a responsibility to fix it. And we have the capacity through this motion right here. And it's not saying that we don't need to apply for grants. Of course we can apply for the grants. But if they're not forthcoming, that leaves us in the exact same position that we are now. And we've done this not 6 months ago out of consolidated cash reserves for Reeby Road. Why not Mary Street? Has to be done. We need to do it tonight.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak against the motion?
I do just have one more question.
Councillor Croslow, who's your question of?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager, just because this is, we haven't done anything, this has just been put tonight. If, for example, and let me just say I'm not against the crossing built too. I'm just trying to ask the question. There's potentially grant money coming in June, even though Councillor Collins seems to have some foresight that we're not getting it, but could we underwrite the building of the crossing if we were to approve it? Can we still apply for that grant money? Do we know whether that grant money could be something retrospective if we appealed to say this is a safety issue, we'd like to build it now, we'd still like to apply for the grant and have the state support?
Already applied.
I understand your point. That's something we'd have to have a look into. I mean, depends on the grant conditions. I don't know whether Mr. Okazi knows what the...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have applied for the grant, and we've been advised that they won't make the determination until June, and they'll consider the competing applications from other councils as well. But yeah, they can't give us much feedback on that at this point.
Anybody wishing to speak for the motion? For the motion?
Can I ask another
For the motion first. Councillor Williams, a question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. From what I've heard so far, and what I know about this issue, Council has approved the crossing. Is that correct? Unanimously, Council has approved the crossing.
Yep.
And all we're talking about is a funding source, is that what we're talking about?
That's correct.
I just wondering, seeing the design work. The design work's not completed at this stage, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've completed 95% of the civil design. We're waiting for the Ausgrid design, and when that's done, that details things like where the power pole is going to be located for us to enable the 100% completion of the civil design.
So, just asking, could this matter still be expedited but still go through the appropriate governance arrangements? In other words, we don't have approval to build it. Council's approved it. We don't have legal approval to continue with it at this stage. If we bring it back to the next meeting with the appropriate funding sources as per the acting general manager has said, can't we do everything that we need to do correctly up front? Is that a reasonable thing to expect?
There's still things outstanding. I mean, I guess they may be completed before that 2 weeks, to be fair, but the process of, as I said before, you'd normally follow is to tell the full funding story and what the options are available, and if council was still of a mind to fund it, where that could come from.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, but the motion doesn't really address that.
We can come back to that in a moment. Are you suggesting an amendment to the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
What's your amendment?
Council commit building. Well, council has already committed building to build the thing. So I think that council reaffirms its commitment to building the crossing. That number 2, the council request funding of the out of the general reserves, but requires the general manager to report back to the next meeting of council as to a funding source. And point 3, that council expedite the construction of the crossing once all approvals are in place from external bodies. And the general manager has confirmed the funding source with an expectation of completion date by the end of term 2.
Yes.
So, could I just clarify with you, Councillor? So, you want it funded out of general reserves, but you also want to look at funding options as well as general reserves? Is that one of the options?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I think we have to follow due process, and the general manager be given 2 weeks to come back to us with the appropriate funding source and the appropriate consideration that the general manager needs to go through. As I've pointed out, that is not going to delay the process at all, because we're still awaiting state government approval to proceed, even though council has approved the project and is working to deliver it as quickly as possible. So to me, we can do that. We can do our due process, meet the requirements of our governance arrangements, at the same time proceed forward with the design and identify the appropriate funding source if we need to supplement, or if the state funding doesn't come ahead. So to me, we can do everything we need to do and still meet a timeline, because council's worked very hard to get this process in place.
So what your motion says, councillor, just is a question to you. You're saying fund it out of general reserves. Is that your intention, or is general reserves one of the options?
It's an option, yes. So funded out of an option such as general reserves, but recognises that it requires the general manager to.
Okay, would you like to make an amendment to that, or are you happy with it the way it is?
Well, no, let's amend that to funding out of, yeah, EG, that's right, yeah.
Right. Is there a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Council has unanimously supported the construction of this roundabout. We've gone through it in the pedestrian crossing. Council has gone through the appropriate processes. It is working through the processes. It can't build it until it gets the appropriate approvals. We need to make sure that council follows its due process, which the General Manager has highlighted to us that we must adhere to. And it is my view that we can achieve both the objectives of meeting the council's requirements as well as expediting the matter and delivering it as quickly as humanly possible. But we can't deliver it until we get the appropriate approvals from the other agencies. But assuming that comes quickly, we can move forward with an expected completion date.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against the amendment to the motion? Councillor Miles.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Again, for the reasons outlined before, this is the exact process that we use to fund Reeby Road. What we're saying is this is less of a priority than Reeby Road was. We funded out of general reserves the construction of that footpath. This crossing is a real safety issue, and again, going back for 2 weeks to tell us what we already know, that this is a priority, seems to me, getting caught up in local government land. I mean, it really is. We've heard from the relevant director that we're 95% there. If we're talking about the placement of electricity poles, then we're there. We can start building the thing. The idea that it's not legal because the electricity pole placement hasn't been finalised is ridiculous to me. We can get on and get this thing done. We can allocate funding to it without the only thing the only amendment in there that I agree with, that I'll be presuming this loses adding to the original motion, is that we adopt a completion timeline of the end of term 2 2020, because I think it's important that we try and reach that target. The community obviously feels strongly enough about it that they have come out here tonight to support the motion or have asked us to proceed in a more speedy manner than we have. And I think we should listen to them. And kicking this back for another 2 weeks or whatever to weight it against the other, and there are a lot of other infrastructure projects that we have to look into, but to kick it back to tell us what we already know, as I said, that this is a priority and needs to be funded, and the funding source which is identified here is general revenue, seems silly to me. Let's just get on and build the thing.
Anybody wishing to speak for the amendment to the motion? Councillor.
I'm sorry.
Who's your question of, Councillor Cresswell?
To you, Mr Mayor, through the General Manager. Can we build a crossing without RMS approval? No.
Yeah, that's the case, yeah.
No.
Through you, Mr Mayor. No, we've got traffic committee approval, but it was subject to RMS approving the detailed design.
So we're waiting on the RMS approval?
We've submitted the concept, but until I've got the 100% completed design, they can't give us a completed approval.
And so through you again, General Manager, what sort of timeframe do you expect we might see before we have approval, before we can put a shovel in the ground anyway?
Through you, Mr Mayor, with RMS and Ausgrid approval by mid-June, we should have, if everything goes to plan, mid-June
So we're not expecting their approval until mid-June.
I was agreed to this notice. It takes 2 to 3 months to go through their process after we've paid the fee. So
And so just back to that first question, are we allowed to build without that approval?
The answer is no. The answer is no. You've been given the answer.
Thank you.
So,
Another question?
Councillor
The
Collins.
Osprey fee, when will the-
Councillor Collins to the General Manager.
General
Thank you.
Manager. The Osprey fee of $8,000, when will that be paid?
through you, Mr. Mayor, as soon as the final design is complete, we will lodge that and pay $8,000 on lodgement. So we're about a week away from getting the final design, electrical
Put
design.
in the $8,000.
As soon as we lodge it, we'll pay the $8,000.
Anybody wishing to speak for the amendment? Against the amendment? Speak for the amendment. Councillor Sanderson.
Look, having heard the facts, just like a basic project management, I think waiting a fortnight to go through the proper process is a little way to go. And at the end of the day, it will probably make no difference to when the project is actually complete. So I would rather follow the due process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody wishing to speak against the amendment? Councillor Collins.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, as Councillor Miles outlined, we can just do this tonight. There has been a number of steps along the way, and there are more to do. If we commit to funding this now, if we commit to building it, all we have to do in a motion is to commit to building it and commit to funding it, and then it just gets done. And then we set a timeline and it's done. Councillor Williams has a talent for tying bureaucratic knots into things, and if we look at the
Councillor Collins, you're not allowed to make those assertions. I ask you not to do that.
Withdrawn.
Stop now.
Withdrawn. I'm looking at the only substantial difference between the motion that I brought and what Councillor Williams has outlined here. And to me, it seems that it's just delaying it all for 2 weeks. Now, in terms of the funding source, it comes out of the bank account. Okay. Now, I don't think anyone's around this table has been too concerned about, which account it has come out of. General reserves is a valid place to fund it. If not, they can find somewhere else. It doesn't really matter as long as it gets done. When it comes to governance, it's about leadership and oversight. Now, it has taken 2.5 years to get to this point. That is not good enough. As the governing body, and I know a little bit about governance, I'm a chartered governance professional, so this is my area of expertise. As a governing body, we need to we need to hold management to account on these issues. It has taken too long. It's not an acceptable outcome that we're at this point. And by the way, the only reason this report is here now is because I had to bring it 2 weeks ago to have this report brought back. It is being kicked down the road. Well, a report last week, a motion last week to bring a report back on this issue. Now, it is very simple. Let's just build it. Let's take leadership. Let's not delay it by 2 weeks. You're saying that all it's going to be is 2 weeks. And what's going to happen next week? We're going to have 2 different reserves to fund it out of? Does that matter? Does that matter when we're talking about a safety issue? Does anyone have a preferred reserve or funding source that we can put up there? Let's just do it now. I don't know what the delay is, and I would encourage us to just put the original motion and get this done by the end of term 2.
Very good. Anybody wishing to speak for the amended motion? Councillor Crassell.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. You always listen to the debate and give a very rational recommendation, suggestion.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. She's passive aggressive, and I don't appreciate that.
Councillor Collins, please have a seat. She's complimenting one of the councillors. It's not passive aggressive to anybody. She's complimenting a councillor. It'd be nice if we heard a little bit more from some other councillors. Thank you, Councillor Crassell.
The reason this isn't an argument is that we're all in agreement. We all agreed to build this crossing. We all signed off on it as a council. resolution of council to get this crossing built. I don't mind seeing it come from reserves, but we've just heard from the council management that it won't be signed off by the RMS until mid-June, and if we build it before then, it's illegal and therefore irresponsible.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Miles, what's your point of order?
Has anyone suggested from the staff that it would be illegal? Because I didn't hear any staff member say illegal. I heard Councillor Williams say illegal.
Can't build it without
Would
the
it be
RMS
illegal?
sign off.
Would it be illegal? So you're saying, would it be illegal to
No,
build a crossing
I said, did any
without
staff
approval?
member use the word illegal?
They may not have used it. Would it be illegal to build a crossing without approval?
From the RMS.
I think the comment that was made, Mr Mayor, was that we can't start until the RMS gives it approval. If I could just have to confirm that's the case.
Would that make it illegal?
It'd be against the guidelines. Can't confirm that it's illegal as such, but it's definitely against the RMS guidelines.
So perhaps you could reframe it to it being against the guidelines.
To being against the guidelines of the state governing body. That be better? Okay. Because we wouldn't want to be stuck in local council land, not listening to our state government bodies who set these guidelines for us to
Or
follow.
not funding it,
Okay.
which is our job.
Councillor Miles, please allow Councillor Cresswell to have the floor.
So my point is, Mr Mayor, the design's not finished, it's at least a week away. It's got to go to the RMS and Ausgrid. It's not going to happen in 2 weeks. Nothing's going to change in 2 weeks, apart from the fact that, thanks to Councillor Collins, we are now going to ask the General Manager to look into how we can fund this as quickly as possible, which is great. We all want the crossing built. I just think it needs to be done responsibly, and I think that what Councillor Williams is suggesting here is the right way to go about it. I would just ask, because Councillor Collins raised a point, and I don't know if it will require an amendment, the $8,000 required for the Ausgrid application, could we at least approve the use of that from reserves?
So you're foreshadowing an amendment
I'm just
to
wondering.
the amendment.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, Councillor Cresswell, we have a motion on the table, we have an amendment on the table.
And I'm speaking to the amendment and asking Councillor Williams, because what you've said here is, can we keep moving with everything, and that the General Manager pursue how we can fund it
So you're
responsibly.
foreshadowing that at the moment.
I'm asking Councillor Williams if he
Councillor
would
Cresswell, we
consider
can
adding
have,
that to
Councillor
his
Cresswell, we can
amendment.
only have an amendment, we can only have a motion and amendment on the table at
Okay.
one time. So you can't suggest an amendment, but what you can do is foreshadow. If this amendment is lost, then
Okay.
we can bring your foreshadowed amendment.
Well, I don't want to change anything except for add that, but that's all I'd have to say. I think it's a really good amendment, and I think I think everyone wins out of it. We stay responsible, we honour our role in the scheme of things. We don't upset the state, and we just keep chipping away and get it done. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak against? Anybody wishing to speak for? So I'll put the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment? That's carried. So the amendment becomes the motion. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak to the motion?
I need to say, Mr Mayor, nothing has changed in the commitment of council to deliver on this project. We're making sure that in doing that we get all the right processes in place. It certainly won't delay the project, because as we've been told, we can't start under the guidelines until that approval process has been through. There's no doubt that council is committed to finding funds for this, and I think all this motion now does is provide guidance to staff to come back at the next meeting with the appropriate considerations that allow us to move forward in the same time frame and as quickly and in the appropriate way as Councillor Collins is trying to achieve. It's a win-win for everybody. It doesn't delay the project at all. And just a footnote to that, I'm a fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, so I do know about governance equally with my other colleagues around the table.
So Councillor says you accept, you seconded the motion. Thank you. Councillors, do we need any further discussion on this? I'll put the motion that's before us at the moment. Is it clear what the motion is? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody. Come back in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
So we move on to item 3.1, motion to do a submission to the independent review of the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust. Move Councillor Sanderson, seconded Councillor Williams. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by acknowledging a speech given by in the House of Representatives just 5 days ago. It was by our local member, the member for North Sydney, Mr. Trent Zimmerman. The member for North Sydney expressed his belief that the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust is one of the most important statutory bodies established by the Commonwealth, and his view that the Trust is one of the most significant legacies of former Prime Minister John Howard. Mr. Zimmerman also expressed the view that these lands should remain in the ownership of the Australian people for time, for all time under the care of the Commonwealth Government. I wholeheartedly agree with all of these sentiments. The member for North Sydney also acknowledged local residents who fought proposals to sell off defence land. I'd particularly like to acknowledge and thank all of our locals who were involved in the formidable Defenders of Sydney Harbour Foreshores movement, which played a major role in the original setup of the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust. A number of our residents are still deeply involved. I was at the public forum held on the 18th of February, and I was very pleased to meet many of our residents there still following this along. Regrettably, the earlier public fora were not well publicised or clashed with other council commitments, so unfortunately that was the only one I was able to attend. Next point I'd like to make is that we are really deeply in need of high quality open public space, particularly since 2008. Successive state governments have relaxed planning controls to permit far more high density residential development. At state level, there's been a belated recognition of the need for public open space. By contrast, the Harbour Trust has embraced community engagement in its transformation of these former defence sites. These sites are not just open space, they are among our nation's most spectacular and valuable public assets, which must remain in ownership of the Australian people in perpetuity. I touched on the late history of this of the harbour sites and the Harbour Trust and its sites. The other thing I can reflect on, that probably other people wouldn't have the same knowledge of, but I'd like to go through the history, but the first one is more basic, everyone would understand. But
Councillor, you've got 5 minutes, so you've spent 2 already.
Thank you, I think I'll get through it. It's firstly important to acknowledge that prior to the arrival of the Europeans, various clans of the Eora nation who shared the Darug language were the wise custodians of Sydney Harbour. Their history must be recognised in any further development of Harbour Trust sites. The 2 Harbour Trust sites that concern Council most are Woolwich Docks and Parkland and the nearby Cockatoo Island. Woolwich Docks and Parkland is an outstanding example of the work of the Harbour Trust in cooperation with the Council. The National and World Heritage listed Cockatoo Island provides an outstanding example of the use of convict labour to provide infrastructure for the colony. It was an important link between our colonial past and the industry of the 20th century. Both sites should remain part of our working harbour. Cockatoo Island has greater connection to Huddersfield than many people would recognise. This is where my local knowledge comes in. My father, who grew up in nearby Ferdinand Street, was at a young age a foreman, fitter and turner at Cockatoo Island. a background that led to his service as a marine engineer during the Second World War, and a career in engineering on his return. Others who worked at both Cockatoo and working waterfront of Woolwich lived in nearby cottages, some of which remain at Alfred Street. Later, when I was at school in Hunters Hill, the children of Cockatoo Island workers and management attended our school. Some of the youth of my day, who I knew through school or sailing, became shipwrights through apprentices at Cockatoo Island. We have a very strong interconnected history, and I think that's an important point to make. Because of those close traditional connections with the surrounding working harbour, our community must have a say in the preservation of these sites and the heritage that they hold. Community engagement has been an outstanding feature of the Harbour Trust work. The Harbour Trust must be properly funded to perform this work. Not funding the Harbour Trust appropriately risks needing to rely on inappropriate partnerships that could deliver funding at the cost of inappropriate development of Harbour Trust sites. I commend the motion, Mr. Mayor.
15 seconds inside the time limit. Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Yes, we do. Councillor Williams, of course. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Anybody wishing to speak against the motion? For the motion? Councillor Miles.
I'll speak for the motion, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, we have quite a significant site of the Harbour Trust in Hunters Hill, and as Councillor Sanderson points out, we have a very close relationship with Cockatoo Island, one that's quite special, and anyone who uses the ferry service, pop by there. And I think it's important that Councillor Sanderson's raised a couple of things, particularly about the formation of the trust and its ongoing commitment to those sites. I would point out, though, that it has been the remit of the trust for a long time to work in partnership with the private sector, and I don't want to diminish that, particularly in our case, because in the case of the Woolwich Docklands, we have a number of companies that operate out of those venues and do an amazing job. I'd like to see more public access and probably more promotion, even through council and through the trust, for the use of those assets. But I don't want to degrade the private enterprise use of those assets as well, which is something that let's be honest, the assets in the trust, like the Dockland, have had a long history of private usage, not just public usage. So, it's horses for courses, really. There are sites that lend themselves to open space and public recreation uses. There are some sites that lend themselves to partnership with the private sector. I'd count Woolwich amongst them, but also I think that there's a lot that we can do as a council, there's a lot the trust can do to open that site more to the public, and potentially to make it a more pleasant place for the public to go. But I agree wholeheartedly that we need to be involved in the process, and I think that this will be one of the most significant shake-ups of the trust since its formation by the Howard government. So it's a very important process, and I commend Councillor Sanderson for bringing it to us.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Anybody wishing to speak against? For? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. As has been pointed out, the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust and all the lands which it oversees has a very special place in Hunters Hill in terms of the opportunity to maintain those in the appropriate relationship to their use and the benefit to the community. And I agree that there's got to be a mix, and the Trust has worked very effectively over the last many years to achieve a balance between those. And there'll always be a gap between, in any organisation, what they want to do as opposed to what is able to be done. So there'll always be a gap, but I don't think that needs to be filled by some rather aggressive commercialisation process. So I think the Trust has got it right so far and is working collaboratively with the community and with with this council. And I do note that council has an obligation to provide advocacy in this area because we do have a stake in it. And some of our predecessors, and I'm thinking of Emeritus Mayor Sue Hootman and Phil Jenkins and a whole range of other people, worked very hard to make the trust come about at a time when it looked like a lot of these important parts of Sydney Harbour foreshore would be lost to the private sector and locked away. So there's been a very strong and constant commitment by Hunters Hill, its people and its council, to ensuring that these foreshore facilities which are under the trust are available and are open to the public. And of course, where possible, some ability to share the costs with the private sector is appropriate, but in a way that preserves the community asset ownership. So I commend Councillor Sanderson's effort in this, and I think this should be a template for how councillors bring forward motions to this council that provide a very detailed analysis and background information that allows staff to very clearly incorporate the decision of council in its thought processes, and equally importantly allows councillors to have the time to consider the issue and the implications. So I do commend to council the effort put in by Councillor Collins with some help from myself, but it needs to be Councillor Sanderson. It needs to be a template for how councillors provide motions in the future, because you have to have some reasons and some justification for what you're putting.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Williams. So if there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. Do you need right of reply? Do you feel anybody has spoken? Any clarifications you need to make, Councillor Sanderson?
Just a very small one.
Please go ahead.
I'd just say that I thank Councillor Miles for his support on the motion, but I'd just clarify in the draft that I've suggested might be put in as a submission. I've said that while partnerships with appropriate entities would be welcome, such partnerships must be fully compatible with the management plan and must be subject to community consultation. Another point I would make on that, the Harbour Trust has done an absolutely spectacular job with the management plans that they've produced, and they have an amazing model of community consultation. And the other point that I would make is, or reiterate if you like, which is at the end of what I had to say the first time round, and that is that it's just so important that the Australian government keeps sufficient funding up to the Harbour Trust so they can continue the work at the level that they've provided so far, because it has been spectacular. I would be very concerned if they start to get into any kind of commercial relationship that isn't fully accountable to community consultation and may in any way diminish some of the amazing heritage and biodiversity and all sorts of other things that are tied up in these amazing sites. Thank you, Mr. Bear.
I'm just cranking the thing close to
If I might also point out, our federal member Trent Zimmerman came out very strongly during the week and made a statement in Parliament about this matter. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. Item 3.2, motion to investigate a seniors parking scheme in the Hunters Hill villages. Moved Councillor Collins, seconded Councillor Moorhouse. Councillor Collins.
Yeah, look, this is very straightforward. I can't imagine it would have any opposition. We had a briefing before the last meeting on our Hunters Hill parking strategy. And I think we've got this report. I thought it was a good report. The consultant was very informative, and I think that there are a number of issues around our parking. It's good to have an overarching strategy, and I think that's somehow been lacking. It's a little bit hodgepodge in my opinion. But one thing I noticed that was missing in this report is that there's no mention of seniors parking. Now, Lane Cove have a seniors parking scheme, which is an RMS initiative, and it provides for just a number of spaces at key areas that are set aside for seniors. And look, I don't know how many spaces we'd have, but I think I don't know what the brief of the consultant was, but I think it should go back to him to investigate this and identify areas where it would be appropriate, and to incorporate it into this strategy before it's brought back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against this motion? Councillor Sanderson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I mean, there are 3 seniors who are members of this council, but
Thanks very much, Councillor.
and as the chair of our Inclusion, Access and Seniors Advisory Committee, I don't think I'll be upsetting anyone in speaking against the motion. In a way, I find it as an older resident a bit patronising. I'm happy to compete with the parking for parking spots with other younger people. The other thing I have about it is we already have a system in terms of parking spots for disabilities, which is all clear. We do have a shortage of parking spots. If they're going to be categorised in this way, I think it just makes the whole system far too complicated. I did read something the other day about there are a lot of people at the age of 55 who are just about on their last legs, and there are plenty of people in their 90s who are capable of doing just about everything. So I think age is the wrong way to categorise this sort of thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody wishing to speak for the motion? Anybody against the motion? I sort of wonder if this is just an issue of going back to the consultant who wrote the report and asking him to give us some more information. Unfortunately, I didn't see the report. I have a copy of the report which I've read, but I wasn't there when it was presented. But it looks to me like we just need to ask the consultant to give us some comments on this seniors. I've seen the seniors parking in Lane Cove, and in the shopping centre it does what you said. It isolates a block of parking for seniors, and all you have to do is apply to the council, get a permit to be a senior and park in those locations. So I have seen it. So anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Collins, would you like to have right a reply?
Just briefly, it's all this is doing is, yes, as you say, Mr. Mayor, going back to the consultant, and at least in this report, at least explain why we shouldn't have one. The report doesn't mention seniors at all. We have 25% of our LGA are over the age of 65. Now at Lane Cove, the RMS guidelines at 67, you're entitled to a seniors permit. That doesn't mean you have to get one. If you don't need one, well, good for you. If you need one, then let's look at whether we can provide that. But this is not a motion to implement a seniors parking scheme. It is simply to make sure that the consultant has looked at it, because it's not mentioned in this 40-page report. So I'd either like to see a seniors parking scheme recommended in the report, or explain why it shouldn't be. That's all I'm asking. So I commend the motion.
Right, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Miles, Councillor Collins. Those against? That's lost. Going to 3.1. Councillor Collins, could I suggest an email to the General Manager outlining that you'd like some further information on seniors parking, and we perhaps go back to the consultant? That might be the way to handle it.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, what do you... there's no support. I'm not sure what you mean.
I think probably you can handle this with an email to the General Manager and ask him to ask the consultant to look at it.
You think it would be a good idea?
I think that'd cover it. 3.3, motion to investigate CCTV options. Councillor Miles, second Councillor Collins. Councillor Miles.
Mr. Mayor, as the sailing season kicks off, I know that we said we'd bring these options back at some point. I just wanted to bring them back to Council's attention. Again, this is just to investigate quotes for the CCTV cameras. We've had a couple of incidents, no serious incidents, but a couple of incidents at Woolwich Baths over the summer. We have obviously the sailing season in full swing, and I know that the Sailing Club has requested this in the past, so I thought, given that it was meant to come back to council at some point in the future, that we spur this one on again. Again, it's just to obtain quotes for the installation of CCTV cameras. It's not committing to anything necessarily, but I think that we should at least look at the options because it's been requested a couple of times now.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? Anybody for?
Can I ask you a question?
Councillor Williams.
Mr. Mayor, when this issue was previously discussed, council then conducted a safety audit.
I think the police did it on our behalf.
Yes. Have we had a report back on the priorities within that safety report?
Thanks for that, Mr. Mayor. Look, I made some inquiries when it was brought to my attention that it was deferred last time, so my understanding is the audit's been completed, but is yet to be written up and reported back to council.
Thank you.
Anybody wishing to speak against the motion? I'd like to. My recollection was that there was a police report prepared, and we should have a look at that, see what they said. I recall in the meeting that Councillor Crasslow pointed out that perhaps some of the things that were being considered should also apply to the Sailing Club, the Henley Bowling, and also the grandstand at Boronia Park. I don't know whether we considered those things or not, I don't recall, but I remember you raising it, Councillor. And maybe streets outside aged persons' homes is another one that's an important issue too. Gladesville Road Community Centre, and maybe even the cricket nets, when the cricket nets are open, is another one to consider in the future. So, General Manager, is that a report we could bring back to council soon?
Yeah, I believe there's just a bit more work to be done on that, and it can come back fairly soon. I just need to check the exact date, but
On the safety audit.
on the safety audit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor,
If I may.
Councillor, you want to speak for it?
Yeah, look, this is the same motion that was brought over a year ago, and it was deferred because a safety audit was coming, and a year later we don't have it. On Australia Day last year, there was a serious assault down there at Woolwich Baths, which is what prompted us to look at these. I just don't know what it seems that whenever one tries to get something done, it always has to be a report to come back, and now we are a year on and we haven't received a report. This is the only thing this is doing, asking for quotes on what it would take to make it happen. Now that can fit in with the safety audit or whatever needs to be done. We've got some quotes, we can apply for some grants, whatever it takes. It's just moving it along, because it hasn't moved along. It was defeated over a year ago, nothing has happened. So as far as I'm concerned, you either support the idea of having these CCTV cameras down there, because it's a safety issue, or you don't. You can't just keep saying we're waiting for a report. You can't do that for a year. It's just quotes. I don't think you have to pay for a quote, do you? Just go and ask for someone to give a quote. They might say, a couple of $1,000 or whatever it is. We'll find a way to do it. But the first step is to find out what's involved, okay? Not wait a year for a safety audit before you ask for a quote. It's ridiculous. I can tell you it's dangerous down there, because I got an email from a resident who ended up going to hospital after Australia Day last year. It's simple. Let's not try and strike everything down simply because it's been, you don't agree with who brought it. It's an important motion. It's for the safety of the community, and 1 year on is not good enough to have not even revisited this. So this is us saying, let's bring it to the front.
Right, thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Miles, Councillor Collins and Councillor McLaughlin. Those against? That's lost. 3.4, motion to reduce food waste and landfill. Councillor Collins, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Collins.
Mr. Mayor, so this kitchen caddy service is a number of councils, a number of progressive councils are doing it, where you have a small bin in your kitchen where you can put food scraps in, put into a special bag that's given by council, and then throw it into your green bin. Now, it is the benefits of this is that it reduces the amount of food scraps in landfill. I know we have a lot of food scraps in my home because there's a lot of mouths to feed. By encouraging people to put their food scraps in there, take it to their green bin, it will reduce the amount of food scraps in landfill. It will reduce our carbon emissions because it will go into compost instead of into landfill, where it's, I believe that there's it breaks down with a methane gas or something. I'm not a scientist. I know there are a couple of scientists here who will gladly correct me if I'm wrong there, but it is good for the environment, it's good for landfill, it is good for our carbon footprint, it is harmless, and if you don't want the bin, you don't have to have one, but it is a way for us to encourage the community to recycle or sort of, reuse their food waste. I saw one initiative from one council, I can't remember which that were, but they've actually gone and created compost bags and taken them to their depot for residents to come and pick up, that the residents have effectively contributed to. And every resident will get 2 bags, I think, if you show a proof of address. So effectively, they're taking their garbage and you're handing it back to them in a productive way. That's quite circular economy. It fits with everything we're doing. I'll leave it there, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I fear I've missed the opportunity to comment, unfortunately. I'm happy to talk to you about it another time. So if there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. Do you wish to write a reply?
Are we not even debating this?
We haven't started.
Well,
The mover's spoken. No one else
okay.
has.
So anybody else wishing to speak on this? Sorry.
Is this all? I don't understand.
So
Is this all being
you moved
arranged
it.
or something?
You moved it. Sorry, my mistake. I was looking at something. So anybody wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Krasov.
I never like to speak against a motion that's about improving the way we consume and make waste. And so the main reason that I'm going to speak against it is the lack of documentation and reading material for your fellow councillors to really get up to speed. And in fact, in your presentation just now, you confused me a little because 1 minute you were talking about the kitchen caddy system and the next minute you were talking about a council compost bagging system. Are they the same thing? Are they different?
No, they're
entirely different. Exactly. So what this is asking is for council to explore a kitchen caddy compost service. Now I know over the last year the council have been doing, the council management staff been doing a lot towards improving our waste management. They've developed some good partnerships, and I know that at the last meeting we asked for a report on more sustainable practices. I know that we have a part-time waste officer now, and I know that we've also recently employed a sustainability officer. So the only reason I just feel it's inappropriate, well, firstly, what's suggested here, this kitchen caddy compost service, no documentation with it, and at the same time in speaking to the motion we presented a different idea, which is exactly why we should be waiting on a report from a sustainability officer who just started last week on, it's a great idea, but we need to do it properly and effectively across the suburb. In the past year we've talked about
sustainable ideas like sustainability talks in the community, sustainable salons, responsible cafes. All of these are things that I'm looking forward to seeing the new sustainability officer and the waste officer present to us, and to jump the gun and to make council go down a path that may not be the right path, because, well, you're not a scientist and I'm not a waste officer. So I'd rather wait for the report and just make a good decision with the good advice from the right officer.
I have a question. What report are you, through you, Mr. Mayor, what report are you waiting for?
Well, we've just engaged a waste officer and a sustainability officer. So, sorry, Mr. Mayor, excuse me. And last week we asked for a report from council on best sustainable practices. I just think we're jumping the gun a bit with.
It's an emergency.
All right, thank you. Please have a seat.
Yep.
I think the question's answered. Anybody wishing to speak? Councillor Miles.
No, I was speaking in favour of obviously the concept, but it's our job to bring issues to the forefront. It's not our job to be told by staff what we should and shouldn't be. It's a good idea, and we say let's investigate it, which is what the recommendation is. I don't understand why we wouldn't investigate it. We do have a waste officer, and I'm sure that the waste officer would love to investigate this kitchen caddy service. Sounds like a great idea. I don't understand why we're putting the cart before the horse a little here, and no disrespect to any of the staff, but it's our job to lead this council and not to read a report and get our ideas from a report. Now, a good idea has been brought by Councillor Collins. It's to investigate something, which is the job of the waste officer. Again, I can't fathom why we wouldn't look into it, or why we wouldn't suggest that the waste officer look into it, because it's our job to bring these things to our staff, because we're the leaders of this community. So I don't get the logic there. Seems like a great idea. I'd love to support it.
Anybody wishing to speak against? I'd like to speak against. The point I was thinking about, and I was thinking about this before, we've asked for a report, we've got sustainability on the table, we've got climate emergency on the table, we've got all of the things that come out of a climate emergency and things we wanted to follow up. And we've charged the staff with looking at a number of things. I think what could happen over the next couple of years here is, if the report wasn't coming, we could just cherry pick lots of things and keep throwing them up. Victoria now has a purple lidded bin in some areas, and they're putting all their food waste into a purple lidded bin. Now, that's been happening in Europe, in Scandinavia for 30 years. I think it's a pretty good idea, but I wouldn't bring it as a motion. I would say to the staff, could you look at what they're doing in Melbourne with a purple lidded bin? I don't think it needs a motion to particularly drive it home. So I think let's get the report, let's look at it, let's suggest some other things, but quite frankly, let's not cherry pick over and over again for months and months and months. Let's just see where we get to. Maybe it needs a workshop. Maybe we all need to sit in a room. We had a workshop recently. We were asked, what do you want to put into the budget for next year? What are the things you think are important? I'm not sure if kitchen caddy compost service was in there. Maybe it was. But I think we need to give the staff a chance to come back, and the new officer, and see what comes back. So, right or reply? Councillor Collins.
This motion is simply to investigate. It is an idea, like Councillor Miles said, it's an idea, it's a good idea. I think it is, it might not be. The waste officer might think otherwise. What this does is, as elected leaders of this community, sometimes we bring things that we think our constituents would appreciate, and we bring it, and we, like Councillor Miles said, we take leadership, and we say that this is important to our community, the people we represent. We want to have this looked at. It is that's what it is. And if we don't, then it would just maybe we'll get a report on it one day. Maybe it'll come back in a report in a month or 2 months or a year. got a few other reports to get out of the way. What's happening here, and let me be very clear that it has been very well seen by not just the Hunters Hill community, but it is, this council is getting attention. I don't think good attention, for being all about going through the motions but not actually doing anything. To say that the climate emergency does everything we need to meet our obligations to be more environmentally sustainable to the community is an absolute, it's a furphy. We have to bring specific initiatives. We need to take leadership. If this was already going to happen, why hasn't it already come to us? Why hasn't it already come to us? Sorry?
Councillor Cresswell, please.
Yeah, Councillor Cresswell, do we need to put the fans on or something? Okay. The waste officer hasn't.
Fortune of not going through menopause.
The waste officer hasn't started. We've been here 2.5 years. Why don't we? I mean, there's always a reason, a process reason. The waste officer hasn't started. We're waiting for this report. We're waiting for this. Here's a good idea that will help the community, the environment, the world. Maybe it might take the waste officer 10 minutes to say it's a dumb idea, and they say, oh well, let's not do it, or they pick it up and say it's a great idea, and then we have a report back in a month saying this is such a good idea, we need to do it right away. As it stands, it'll get knocked back because that's the politics of this council. They just want to knock back anything I bring. That's fine. I stand by my record. It's a good idea. It's worth looking at, and anybody that suggests it's not a good idea, I think they should have the courage to speak up and explain why. And it is not justification to say we're not, even though it's a good idea, we're waiting for another report or someone to start. There's always something. There's always something. This is probably going to be the same speech I give on the next one, which I'm sure. But anyway, so I commend the motion, and I hope that the sustainability officer might be able to spare 10 minutes just to see whether this is a good idea or a bad idea.
I'll put the motion then. Those in favour, Councillor Collins, Councillors Miles. Those against, that's lost. Thank you. 3.5, motion to investigate alternative energy sources. Councillor Collins.
I wonder if I even bother, Mr. Mayor. Our objective here with the climate emergency is to reduce our carbon emissions. One thing people always talk about with when we're talking about climate change or carbon emissions is energy. It's one of the difficult ones. You need renewable energy sources, but you need base load power. It's always that debate. Now, we have a very large roof on this town hall, which may very well be suitable for solar panels, or maybe they're not. I know that there's none on there now, and I imagine that the and I don't want to anticipate anybody's sort of opposition to this, that let's wait for the report on it. Well, it's been 2.5 years, there's still no solar panels on it, let's look at it. Let's bring it to the forefront, simple as that. If it doesn't work, maybe it's pointing in the right direction, I don't know, maybe it's not, but we use a lot of power, and we could potentially save money. We could save money, we could save the environment, and we could actually get this done. Or we could just not look at it. So I think we should look at it, so I commend the motion.
Anybody wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Cresswell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Largely because it's great that you're finally getting on board with the climate emergency, but there was a resolution of council at the last meeting, and what this motion now does on the back of that resolution is stick its oar into operational matters. We're waiting on a report from council. It'll be comprehensive. It will be a whole of council sustainability framework. based on leading edge United Nations Sustainable Development Goals towards net zero emissions, water management, behaviour change in waste, sustainable infrastructure. Parks Council, Bayside, Tweed, Waverley, Newcastle, City of Sydney, councils all over the country are doing an awesome job of this, and they're not doing it by sticking willy-nilly motions in without knowing anything. They're doing it with well thought out strategy and meticulous planning. With our sustainability officer now on board, they only started last week and I'm very excited about it, it would be folly for us to pass this motion tonight and just muck our oars in to what is now an operational matter because of the motion that most of the council has passed on the climate emergency at the last meeting.
Anybody wishing to speak for the motion? Councillor Miles.
I think it made pretty clear last meeting I'm not for a climate emergency or anything of the sort. I'm for a target. Thought-based, objective-driven, measurable. That's what I think is useful.
That's what the report asks for.
The report is apparently going to be all these things. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard any of what's just said there. That's going to be based on UN guidelines, that it's going to be, all-encompassing. That was not discussed, so I don't know where that's come from, but maybe it will be. As to what other councils are doing, I've seen many motions from individual councils from many councils, Canada Bay, Waverley, a whole bunch of councils about sustainable practices and things like solar panels. I've seen them because I've been involved in local government for a long time. And these specific motions do come up, and that is the job of councillors, is to raise ideas in their community that sometimes come from suggestions from constituents, sometimes they're things that you come across in your life as a councillor, and this is one of them. I spoke at the last meeting about the fact that there's only one council building that I know of with solar panels on it. That's pretty disgraceful, really. If we're really trying to do something about energy consumption or sustainable practices. I've got a toilet block at Riverglade Reserve that's got some solar panels on top. We do have a lot of roof space, and I think it's high time that we investigate what we do with that. And I think solar is the obvious thing to look at. And it may be that a wonderful report comes back to us that probably will recommend solar, which means that we have to get a report about that solar initiative. I say, let's just do it. It's not investigating these things may occur as part of the process, they may not. For the previous motion about the kitchen caddies, I'd not heard that idea before, so I very much doubt that was in the remit of the waste officer. Maybe it was, but I'm not going to wait to find out. It's our job to bring ideas to this table. It's supposed to be an engaging, ideas-driven body, and the suggestion that we just wait on reports and cherry pick out of the reports, well, I think that ideas that are valuable ideas should be given their correct due. So I don't see any problem with investigating solar panels.
Somebody wishing to speak against?
Could I ask a question, Mr. Beck?
Councillor Sansom, who's your question on?
Well, probably through you to the General Manager, I think. Will the report requested at point 4 of the climate change resolution of last meeting investigate the installation of solar panels on council buildings?
So will we investigate that as part of the actions from the last meeting? Is that the question?
Yes, I'm just the report that's been already asked for. Is it going to investigate that?
Can I just give you a page number of the point 4?
It doesn't specifically mention it, but I think.
Look, without looking at the motion from the last meeting, there'll be a range of things that will come back in a report that responds to that resolution.
Well, if it's not, can it do so?
By this, yes. By passing this motion, absolutely.
No, we don't need to pass this motion.
Well, we could,
So
and then it would do
Councillor
exactly.
Collins, Councillor Collins,
Sorry.
Councillor Sanson. So your question is, could it be added?
Well, if we could just simply formalise that one way or another.
Well, I think you can do it.
If I could do that with
No, that would be
notice.
Could I
point of order,
suggest
Mr. Mayor.
that
That would be interfering with operations. That hasn't come from this council. He
Councillor
cannot
Collins,
direct it.
please have a seat, because Councillor Sanderson has the floor. So Councillor Sanderson, could I suggest that either you or Councillor Collins could send an email to the General Manager and ask him to address that as part of the last motion?
Well, I've got a question without notice prepared for tonight, which I think will address this in any case, so I'll submit that. I mean, I'm
Do you have any other questions?
No, that's it, thanks.
Anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I think, did you use the word cherry picking? Somebody has.
I did. I was saying, the suggestion I had was that we can probably think up lots of things in isolation of everything else, and I think if we get a proper report from a proper scientist that works in this area, maybe it might be put into some priority order.
I agree. And that's where I think this motion fails, is that in any sensible report back to us, they will be considering solar panels. So it's redundant. It is trying to focus on one aspect of a comprehensive report that's going to come back to us. It's not saying do something, it's saying investigate. Well, we've already set in train a process, a very thorough process, to investigate a whole range of options, and solar panels will be one of them. In terms of kitchen caddies, I've used one of those in Coffs Harbour. They've had them for the last 5 or 6 years. And that will be another thing which will come back in the comprehensive report as to the priorities, how it will be achieved, and the importance of it in the overall scheme of things. Science plays a very important role in this whole waste management process and dealing with the alternative energy processes. So I think it's important for council to step aside and let the operational side of council come back to us with well-considered, scientifically based and evidence-based information for us. I could not imagine it won't come back with solar panels being considered in it, and a whole range of other opportunities which this council has. And this council, I get sick and tired of hearing this negativity around the table, Mr. Mayor. This council is very active and very proactive in the way it deals with a whole range of issues, including this one. We've done a lot in years. We may not have done a Rolls-Royce job, but we're working our way through it, and we're now providing a framework to actually really get into the nitty-gritty of what is evidence-based way forward. So I think that this really is just stating the obvious, and I don't think it's necessary to be directing staff on things which they're going to be considering anyway. It should come back as a holistic report, and I'm sure it'll come back in a thorough and scientific way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak for the motion? Against the motion? I make the point that I made previously. I think we're looking at sustainability, we're looking at the climate emergency and what comes with that in the report coming back to Council. We've got a sustainability officer. It will take time for that sustainability officer work her magic, but she will. And I don't want to see us cherry pick for the next 12 months on everything we think of. I think it's unwise to do it. We might end up passing some motions on the matters which are not major priorities, and inadvertently we've directed ourselves down the wrong track. So I'm definitely speaking against it. Councillor Collins, right a reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting to watch those opposed to this try and find a way to get the solar panels into the report that we're going to get without, passing this motion, when it would simply do that. A number of months ago, I think it was last year, Councillor Crassoy brought a motion to put a beehive somewhere. Now, if that's not a, and as far as I'm aware, did not wait for for a bee officer to start or a appropriate officer or a report. Councillor Crassoy had an idea to put a beehive. It was, look, I don't know, I supported it. I don't know what it's doing now. I'm sure it's bustling with honey. But the fact is, I would not just not back an idea simply because someone brought it. What's going on here is a complete dysfunction, complete lack of leadership, because no one here is willing to stand up and say, this might be a good idea. Can someone take a look at it? That's what our role is. When we go to the election, 2.5 years ago, we say, these are our ideas, this is what we want to do. And we'll go to an election in 6 months and we will have a similar bunch of ideas. No one goes to election saying, oh, well, we're waiting for a report. We want to do things. This is about leadership. And it's an absolute disgrace what this council has come to by suggesting that raising an idea and putting it on the desk of staff to look at is interfering in operations. That's simply not true. We don't have any last week the climate emergency, which I didn't support because it was simply grandstanding with absolutely no substance. If it is an emergency, why don't we have solar panels now? That should have been done this week, right? So no one wants to take a stand to actually do it. It is simply to put it on the agenda. The waste officer, the report that's coming back, the kitchen caddy, they could just go on their desk and they could look at it. But you know what? Because of this game that's being played, where it's automatically knocking back an idea simply because it's come from me, is immature. It's not helpful, and I don't think that the community would appreciate it. And I would encourage those that are knocking back ideas simply for political reasons to reflect on that and think about what they're actually contributing. Because Councillor Miles is right. We are not just here to be fed reports. We are here to lead. We are here to set the agenda, not receive it. That's what leadership is. That's what we've been elected to do. So I would encourage you to support this motion. Make it a priority. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to...
Councillor Cresswell, you have a point of order?
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's an order or a clarification, because Councillor Collins just said that I brought a B motion without any backup, because I just thought it was a nice idea, and I just wanted, just for your benefit, to help you.
Is this a point of order, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, it is, Mr Mayor, because Councillor Collins just said...
Just checking what you said. We can't go back to the motion because the speakers are finished.
I'm not speaking to the
required
motion.
to put the motion.
Yep.
Put the motion.
But you can put a
Councillor
clarification.
Collins to clarify. Thank you, Mr Mayor. When I brought the motion around native stingless bees, I had been working on it for about 1.5 years with the previous General Manager, the current General Manager, the Bushland Officer, and a local scout group.
So, Mr Mayor, is this a point of order?
Yes, it is.
It's a clarification.
And I also provided information with it, along with inviting a bee expert to come and present to the school principals meeting. So I actually backed my motion up with a lot of evidence and a lot of support from the council staff, who I had approached and asked if it would be something the council would be interested in supporting if I put it as a motion. So I didn't just slap something on the table and demand the council officer look at it. I actually had put a lot of thought and research into the motion before I presented it. So I just wanted that.
If I might address that, Mr Mayor.
No, you can't.
You forgot that you also put out a press release.
Councillor Collins, you can't address
same.
it. It's just a clarification. And she was responding to your assertions. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour, Councillor Collins, Councillor Miles, and Councillor Sanderson. Those against?
Fantastic.
Those against? That motion's lost. 3.6, motion to ensure transparency in press communications. Councillor Collins. Seconded, Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's great that the work that this council has been doing on better communications. We haven't traditionally engaged with the press before our communications officer started. I think I was the only one putting out press releases, so it's good to have an operational voice coming.
You want to get in print.
Councillor Cresswell, please. Go ahead, Councillor Collins.
But we have to be mindful that we can't, as a government organisation, if we are putting out press releases, it needs to be an operational, not political, and it needs to be free from spin.
And factual.
Councillor Collins, Councillor Crassoy. This is a point of order, then you need to stop doing that.
Okay.
Councillor Collins, go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor, will you warn her? She's done that 4 times already.
Councillor Collins, go ahead.
So, no spin. And what spin can be is anything from a blatant lie to a half-truth to just not telling the full story. And I'd like to draw your attention to a press release that was put out by this council regarding the Reby Road matter. And January 31st, Council voted unanimously in 2019 to undertake the works following feedback from the local and school community. Quote from Mayor Mark Bennett, Council is consistently looking at ways to make getting around easier for the community. Quote, I'm pleased that our council team was able to deliver improvements in this school zone in time for students returning in 2020. Now, that's not really how it happened. It wasn't all a very nice story. There were a number of stories in the Weekly Times. Parents Association urges fast action on Reby Road footpath. It's only a question of time before Hunters Hill student is hit by a car, and this is after several times of it being defeated at this council. And then what we end up with is a photo here, and Mr. Mayor, you're in the photo with the PNC president and another PNC member, spruiking the footpath, and it's an interesting photo to see there, Mr. Mayor. It's a bittersweet moment for you. It's a sweet moment because it is the best public works project that's been completed in this term of council. Because hundreds of kids are safer every day because this was done. So that's obviously a sweet moment. But at the same time, Mr. Mayor, on 2 occasions you tried to stop it from happening. You didn't support the motion to include the footpath when I brought it to the meeting in September. I think it was September, and then when it went to the local traffic committee, you voted against it as well. Okay?
Councillor Collins.
I'll get to the
point of order. I have a point of order.
Yes.
What happens inside that local traffic committee is confidential.
Actually,
it's confidential.
The voting was actually put there.
It's confidential. It's a closed meeting.
The voting pattern is
confidential. It's a closed meeting.
No, the voting pattern is.
And what you reported is incorrect. It's not true what you've reported.
Well,
so, because of closed meeting, I'm not going to discuss it with you, but you reported it incorrectly. I'm happy to take it up at the next traffic committee inside the meeting,
absolutely,
which is a closed meeting. Please don't continue on what would happen inside a closed meeting. You've reported it incorrectly.
Mr. Mayor, we need to be mindful that if we're sending out press releases, we need to make sure they're balanced, that they are not misleading in the way that they're not telling the whole story. And I would appreciate if we had a little bit of class in the way that these things are done, because if council is going to be issuing press releases, it should be operational. It should be operational, with councillors free to engage with the press in their own way. So, all this motion does simply is saying that all press releases will be put through, given to council at the same time. All councillors, that's all it's saying. I know it's going to get voted down because everything I put is. Council make all future press releases available on the Hunters Hill Council website exactly as issued. That would simply mean that the community get to see the way that we engage with the press, to make sure that, okay, I'll wait to write a reply to finish. But anyway, thank you.
Anybody wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think this motion requires much debate. It's well understood by most councillors that you, Mr. Mayor, and the General Manager are the spokespeople for this council. I have confidence that you and the General Manager will keep other councillors appropriately briefed about information that's released to the press, just as I inform you about any dealings I have with the press. However, I know, like you, I and other councillors, I have on a number of occasions received calls from local press asking for responses to press releases from Councillor Collins. Press releases that I've not cited. Before we vote on this motion, I ask through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Collins, does Councillor Collins intend to abide by the standard he proposes to impose on others?
Councillor Collins.
Simple answer is that councillors should be free to engage with press or the community in any way they see fit. This is simply about council staff. The operational side of the council should be conducting, releasing press releases and providing them to councillors, because we are actually the governing council of that body. And so we should actually, from a strict governance sense, be seeing what goes out there, because we are responsible to the community to make sure that is accurate. So in answer to your question, no, you will not see my press releases, but I would hope that you will see council's press releases so you can correct the record if need be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Mr Mayor, but it seems like a double standard, if I could suggest that.
Is there anybody wishing to speak against the motion? For the motion? Councillor Miles.
Speak for the motion, Mr Mayor. I'm not going to really get into the tit for tat, but really, there's nothing controversial in this. The press releases should be on the website, and when press releases are issued, they should be sent to councillors and probably staff, all council staff as well, or relevant departments. But as the governing body of council, we should be kept abreast of the press releases going out, and we're doing a really great job with our communications now. We're getting on top of things. I feel for the first time in my 8 years on council, we're getting a lot of the positive message of Huntersville out there. I'd like to know when press releases go out, and I think that it would be appropriate to put them on the website, as I know Councillor Sanderson is passionate about having the business papers on the website. I just don't see an issue with that. It seems very fair to me, and that's what the motion is going to do. I understand there's a bit of heat in the room, but that's essentially what all the motion does.
Anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Collins, I have a question. The press releases exactly as issued. Do you have a concern that the press releases are not coming to you exactly as issued? Do you think there's something going wrong? Or?
Mr Mayor, the first press release that was sent on this issue was not sent to me. It was, I think I got an email of the context of it, but I want to actually see.
Councillors, councillors, please.
So the answer is, what I mean is, if a PDF with a photo is sent off to the press, then that's what should be sent to councillors, exactly as is, not just an email saying this is what we sent. So that is, and look, my understanding is that since I've put this motion, council staff have been doing it because it's good practice. What this does is it basically says that it becomes policy, just to enforce not just practice but policy. And by the way, it is not good governance if press releases are sent out to the public that we are not aware of. As the governing body, we are required to know what is going on and what is being put out to the public. So that answers the question.
Yep.
I hope.
So I'll speak against it because I think that we're already doing this. To the best of my knowledge, we're already doing it. I believe councillors get exactly what's sent out to the press. It's not modified, it's not things taken out of. You can show me some examples. I'll take it up with the General Manager. I think it's disappointing you won't agree to send us your press releases. I saw your press release in the TWT last week. It looks like you've copied the mayoral column and made it appear to be the mayoral column. I think it's very disappointing you're masquerading as someone producing a column that purports to be a statement from council. You're not the spokesperson for council. What you put out...
Point of order, Mr Mayor, I did not
Point of order.
say that I was representing council. I represented myself as a councillor, as an elected council of Huntersville. It wasn't the Huntersville
Okay.
Council column, it was the Huntersville happenings.
Well, I'm required to deal with...
happening in Huntersville?
I'm required to deal with a point of order. So,
Yes.
councillors, I'll put it to you as a question. Do you think the column in the TWT last week purported to be a column produced by Huntersville Council or by Councillor Collins? I'll put it to you. Councillor Williams.
I agree with you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Crashaw.
Well, I would just suggest that if it was by Councillor Collins, there should be a little subline saying this is the view of me, myself and I, or it's paid advertising editorial.
Excuse me, point of order, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, is this a trial?
We're dealing with your point
Is
of
this a
order.
trial?
No, we're dealing with your point of order.
So why...
Please have a seat.
Is this a trial?
Please have a seat. We're dealing with your point of order.
Sorry, Mr Mayor,
This
what
is
point
not-
of
this
order
is
are
not
you
a-
dealing with?
yeah, this is
Because this is
grossly
beginning a little
inappropriate.
farcical.
Please have a seat.
Grossly inappropriate.
Please have a
Mr. Mayor.
seat. I'm required to put it back to the council. There's a point of order and I can refer that back to council for their opinions. That's what I'm doing. Please have a look at
And
your
what is
code
the
of meeting
point of order,
practice.
Mr Mayor? Can I ask?
Well,
what
you
is
raised the point of order.
Yeah, but what is the point of order we're talking about now?
You raised the point of order that
What is the...
it was inappropriate that I said that your column in the TWT last week purported to be a spokesperson for the council. That's what we're dealing with. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Please have a seat, Councillor Collins. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for raising the matter. I was deeply concerned by it. No matter who owns the copyright to the Huntersville happenings, I mean, that is regularly put out under your name, and I would have thought that this is a classic case of passing off, if you like, that to the most readers that would be seen to be something that was endorsed by Huntersville Council.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
We're dealing with your point of order already, so please have a seat till we've dealt with your point of order. I've got two more councillors to ask. Please have a
Mr Mayor,
seat.
it is grossly inappropriate. It is
No, it's
grossly inappropriate what you are trying to do. You are trying to go around the table and
Councillor
suggest-
Collins, please sit down because I'm dealing with your point of order. I'm allowed to deal with your point of order under the code of meeting practice and I'll deal with it that way. I won't have any more disruptions from you. Councillor Miles, what do you
You
think?
missed Councillor McLaughlin.
No, I haven't. I'll come back to it. What do you think, Councillor Miles?
Why would you? Sorry, why would you?
Because I'm
change-
in the chair and it's my choice, Councillor. Councillor Miles.
I think that a column put out with a councillor's face on it under his name is not purporting to be any other view than his own. I equally think that the process that you're undertaking right now is wildly inappropriate, using special powers essentially afforded you in the chair to try and put Councillor Collins on trial for something he did in the local paper is getting pretty close to a misuse of your position.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McLaughlin.
I prefer not to answer.
All right, thank you. So, councillors, I'll ask for your vote on this point of order. Are we upholding the point of order or not? Those in favour of upholding
Could you state
the point of order?
Mr Mayor, so everyone knows what this farce is about.
Those in favour of supporting Collins' point of order?
What can you state? What the
Those
point of order
against?
was? What was the point of order?
The point of your
Can
point
you
of order.
state it, though?
It's your point of order. Why don't you tell us?
But you don't even know, Mr Mayor. You've
I do.
forgotten
I've already
what
said
is.
it twice. Councillor Collins' point of order was that I'd said that his column in the TWT purported to purported to be representative of council's opinion, which it's not. So that's what you raised a point of order on. Are we clear on that?
Okay.
Those who think the point of order should be upheld? Those against? That's lost. So let's get back to it. So where were we before you raised the point of order, Councillor Collins? Please have a look at the Code of Conduct. You'll see it laid out in there if you have any concerns. Anybody wishing to speak Against? 4? Where do we sit on this?
I think it's right to reply, Mr.
Right to reply, let's go.
This is simply about improving the transparency of communication between council and the public. This whole discussion is a complete farce and is grossly inappropriate. But if we get back to this motion, this ensures that council is aware of what's going on in public. We're entitled to know that. We are obliged to take an interest in it. And Mr. Mayor, when you say that we are all getting that information anyway, it is because I put this motion and asked for it. So at the moment, it is the practice, but it is not the policy. This makes it the policy, and it means that it has to be done every time.
All right, is everybody clear what we're voting on here, councillors? I'll put the motion, page 18. Those in favour?
Is it understood?
Yeah, I think
It's
they've
the
said it is
motion.
understood.
Yes.
Those in favour? Against? I vote against this.
Passed.
Carried. 4.1, development applications determined under delegated authority. Councillor Miles, moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Williams. Councillor Miles, did you wish to speak to this? Anybody, any comments from councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. 4.2. 4.2, development applications determined by Development Control Unit, January to February 2020. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Williams?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, any further discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried. 4.3, quarterly budget review at 31st December 2019. Moved Councillor Collins, seconded Councillor Williams. Councillor Collins.
Question through you, Mr. Mayor, of the General Manager, page 35. Council has received, forecasted budget year-end surplus of $821,000. This included a $1 million upfront fee received in the current year from Council's new bus shelter contract. Council has received preliminary advice regarding the portion of this income which is required to be recorded this year and subsequent financial years. Can you share what that advice was?
We've treated as the $1 million upfront fee as an income item this year, as it was budgeted last year. Because of the change in accounting standards, we asked our auditors to comment on the treatment of that, because there's a lot of changes in the way fees and grants and so on have come through in the new standards. So there, I think we asked them, I think we might have reported this in the September review. At that time we'd asked the question, so after some deliberation they've come back and they feel that their initial advice, which we're still talking about, is that the $400,000, roughly $400,000 that we had to spend on carrying out the works that lead up to the bus shelters meant that $400,000 worth of income could be brought to account this financial year, and the remainder would need to be brought over subsequent financial years of the contract. We have sought some legal advice on that, and we had some discussions with the auditors recently, and they've asked us to send in some information pertaining to that advice, mainly in relation to the conditions of the contract and so on. So we're just trying to, we're still in discussion with the auditors about that matter. So I think we only sent some stuff off to them, I think, late last week, and we'll be having some more discussions with them this week as well, or perhaps this week.
Yeah.
And when they have a chance to review what we've sent them.
And then we have a report back council when that be?
Back in the March review that we've indicated there.
Okay.
We've got the second, haven't we? Councillor Williams, you have Councillor Collins?
Yeah, I will speak briefly on this issue because it is an important issue. This $1 million, which is represents a sign-on bonus for a 17-year contract. I don't believe it should be. I don't believe it should be up front. I don't believe it should be $1 million of income. I can potentially accept the argument that it should be $400,000. But we have an issue which I brought to council's attention. I think it was October last year of a. It's always about Hunters Hill happenings. Another from the mayoral column. If I can just quote from that. In addition, the council received a net operating surplus of $986,000, including capital income, grants and contributions, and a deficit of $495,000 when these items are excluded. However, had a $1 million payment due from the new bus shelter contract been received as budgeted and expected, a positive operating result would have been achieved. This $1 million revenue will now be carried into the 2019-2020 financial year and added to our other initiatives contributing to a positive operating result, including capital income in 2019-20. So if this advice comes back that this income isn't to be counted all in the 1 year for the 17-year-old contract, then this statement that's been made in the middle column is incorrect. So question of you, Mr. Mayor, will you retract that statement and clarify the point if it is found that we cannot count the $1 million up front?
I think the statement when it was made was correct, and I'm happy to refer it to the acting general manager who was the finance manager at the time, and we checked that together and it was correct at the time it was made. We're still challenging the advice from the senior auditor at the moment because we don't agree with it. The legal advice we received says what the auditor said is incorrect, and it comes down to an issue of some semantics about the wording in the contract. Now, I can ask the person who was the finance manager, was that correct at the time?
It was our understanding at the time that we'd bring it to account in 1 year, but because of the new standards and wanting to understand whether there was any implications, we just thought we'd check it with the auditors because we'd have to deal with that at the end of the year anyway. So we thought at the time we'd do that. So it seems there's a couple of different views on it. I mean, it comes down to our performance obligations under the contract, and we believe that we've satisfied those. So it's a fairly technical issue, I believe, at the moment. So
we still think it's correct. What's in that column way back then was correct at the time. At the moment, we still think it's correct, and we're pursuing it.
Okay, well, I might just say that there's a difference between correct at the time and your understanding at the time. The accounting standards were
correct at the time.
Well, no, if the accounting standards, which this council's obliged to abide by, state that it can't be carried all in the 1 year, then we put out misleading information, and I would expect that to be brought back. So it's in our budget. It's in this column. I think it needs to be brought back sooner than the March quarterly review. So I might do that as a question without notice, so we can get clarification on that because it is important, and I do believe it should be carried over the course of the contract. Other than that, I just have some questions, if I can, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager. On page 38, councils receive a voluntary planning agreement of $200,000 for off-street parking spaces. Can you advise what that's for?
Through you, Mayor, that was a voluntary planning agreement from the property of the development application of 1 to 3 Ride Road.
1 to 3, okay.
And due to the fact that inadequate car parking spaces could be provided, the council of the day accepted that VPA agreement for $200,000 from memory to be used for community benefits or community use up at the Hunters Hill Village.
So we've been waiting on it for a while then.
We've just recently received it with the current new owner, the developer, activating that VPA.
Okay. Another question. Further down, increase in local priority grant project expenses for digitisation of the Hunters Hill Council minute books, $11,600. Can you give some background as to what that is?
Mr Mayor, I'll take that on notice and come back with some information on that.
He's asking questions.
Okay.
Sorry, on notice?
Yeah, I'll take the notice and come back.
Does that then all go in the questions about notice for next week?
I can bring it back by way of just the bulletin.
Sure.
The bulletin. Yep.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion needed on this, councillors? Can I put the recommendation there on page 34? Those in favour? Against? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 4.4, review of delivery program. Move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Crasso. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very proud of this report, Mr Mayor. We hear a lot of negativity around this table, but the reality is this council is moving forward at a great pace. And I know Councillor Collins is leaving. Moving at a great pace and is using its talent and its resources to do things that will be leading in local government. And not only that, but our ability to use best practice and to serve our community with the most up-to-date and most transparent processes available in local government. And I think the General Manager's comments that because we're small we can are very evident here. We've got a very dedicated, a very effective group of staff under good leadership from our General Manager are looking at opportunities everywhere for us to provide leadership in the way that we serve our community and advance and improve our delivery. And it's just interesting, I've seen a lot of reports in my time, but this program delivery report indicates that 97% of the items are on target or delivered. I've never seen that in an organisation that deals with such complexity as a council, and it's a clear indication that this council is moving forward and the community have a lot to look forward to in the future, both in terms of delivery, in terms of its advocacy, and in terms of its leadership. So I commend the report, Mr Mayor. I think it provides us with world-class outcomes for a very detailed and comprehensive program this council has in place.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? For? Councillor Miles.
Just a question, if you would, Mr Mayor. On page 55, I believe the determination, sorry, this is Council provides a safe workplace for a community facility. I believe that 17th December was deferred because we did have a report come back to our last council briefing. So can we just get that?
I'm sorry, can you point to what you're looking at?
Sorry, page 55. Last dot point in Q2 comments. Is that correct? I think that my recollection was that the panel deferred for more comments the town hall plans. Can take it on notice.
I think that's correct.
As
I think that's correct. Yeah. I can think of a particular thing, the pods at the end of the council chambers and a couple of other things. Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Just a question about the planning panel approved the council's proposed plans with numerous standard conditions.
Okay.
So that's straightforward now. Preparing a construction certificate to do the works, which incorporate the front entry point, the lift for disabled, the wheelchair access to the front, opening up the areas at the near the mayor's office and the like. So that's That's been approved by the planning panel a while ago. I
Okay,
went to the
good.
minutes.
No, I
last-
just, my recollection must have been wrong.
So the comment's correct, but we're also looking at some changes after the last meeting, weren't we? Is that what you're-
They would be the conditions set out, I would imagine. I don't think it needs changing if that is the case.
That is-
It's just a date.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Not really worth having a barney over.
Any further discussion required, councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Uh, 4.5. Move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the council's had the benefit of a briefing by the Parramatta River catchment group leader, coordinator, and I don't intend to go over the details to any large extent, except to highlight what this group has achieved. Again, dealing with a waterway as complex and as degraded over many, many years, and the legacies that come with that. It's a tribute to organisations that have come together, and there's a large number of organisations, councils and state governments, to put together, again, world's best practice for a world-class river, a path, a roadmap forward to provide not only the catchment of the Parramatta River with a healthy and activated resource, but also for the Greater Sydney and providing guidance and leadership to the world. It has a lot of legacy issues which can't necessarily be easily overcome. But what's come out of this plan and what's now going into operational aspects are many things that are very useful for the way that we do our business. We had a report on Thursday night at the last meeting it was Sydney Water and the EPA, or no, it's DIPE or whatever they're called these days, the planning mob. And they've been working very closely with our council and all other councils on standardising the standards by providing best practice for incorporation in our LEP and DCPs on how to have better management of stormwater, better utilisation of water and reuse and a whole range of better urban design to achieve the outcomes. It not only has been involved in those useful tasks for council, but it also is setting agendas for fauna and flora and for a whole range of other community engagement and activities. It benefits this council through that collaboration, it benefits the catchment, and it benefits the whole of Sydney and the greater community for having come together, cut aside bureaucracies, worked out a very clear and well articulated strategy and plan to move the river forward and the communities that depend and work around it. So I commend the strategy, and they're moving very quickly at the moment to put the implementation in place.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? For? Any further discussion required, councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's unanimous. Thank you. I think the next one is 4.8. We've dealt with 4.6 and 4.7 minutes of the Conservation Advisory Panel, 19 Feb. Move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Grassoy. Any discussion required? Councillor Williams?
Not really, I think it's pretty self-evident, but council needs to be aware of the discussions that are taking place at one of our most significant heritage buildings, which is Mookabilla. Not Mookabilla. What? Waibelina, that's the one. Waibelina, which at the moment is going through a series of iterations, and council is, or the Conservation Advisory Panel has been trying to guide that process. It's a very significant building, and the panel is taking time to see if we can get it get it right. So apart from that, the rest of it is as read.
Thank you, councillor. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried. Recommendation, rather. 4.9, meeting of the School Principals and Liaisons Forum. Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Crassoy. Any discussion required? I'll put the motion. I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 4.10, councillor briefing, 17th of February. Councillors, any discussion on this? I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Those against? That's unanimous. Thank you. It's a very good meeting. General business? I think that's the end of it. Is there general business? Is there any general business, councillors? Any further discussion? Meeting closed 10 past 10. Any questions with notice? Thank you.